this is Tigrai Television. Welcome if you're watching live on your television screens or on our social media platforms, YouTube and Facebook. I'm Salome Tigrai, and I'll proceed to the details. At least 6 killed in a shelling in the district of Irab in eastern Tigray by Eritrean forces. The shelling has also caused injury to 25 others. The shelling was conducted on Monday and has resulted in the destruction of public as well as private properties. It is to be recalled that Eritrean troops have shelled the town of Adigrat on the 7th of September 2022, killing 5 while injuring scores more. The allied Ethiopian and Eritrean forces have continued to conduct aerial and artillery bombardments, inflicting heavy damage on the civilian population in Tigray. Bureau of Communication inaugurated its documentary on Tigray genocide this afternoon. The Bureau said the documentary was made to file atrocities and to help the international community understand crimes committed against Tigrayans by the Ethiopian government and allying forces. Let's take a look at the report. Bureau of Communication inaugurated its documentary on Tigray genocide this afternoon. The Bureau says the documentary was made in 5 months and it tried to show the genocide being committed on Tigrayans. Closing the inauguration ceremony, member of Tigray Central Command Getachew Reda said the documentary would give more evidence to the international community to call what has unfolded in Tigray by its name, genocide.
Listening to the atrocities in different periods of time, the international community had not yet taken a strong stance on the genocide committed on Tigrayans. I would like to thank you for your commitment on documenting these crimes in a way the international community would understand.
The documentary comprises of atrocities committed by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces, as well as the Amhara forces in different parts of Tigray, including Aksum, Mariam Dengalat, Samre, Bora, Gijet, Mahabaradego, and Nasaga. It also tried to show the level of cruelty of the government of Ethiopia, bringing some cases such as the drone attacks in the David IDP camp in January of this year and the bombardment of a marketplace in Togoga in June of 2021. The ceremony was finally closed, certifying individuals and institutions that put an effort to the accomplishment of the project. Tigray Bureau of Education says Ethiopia's Ministry of Education is violating international laws. Head for the Bureau, Shushay Amara, states that the Ministry of Education, spending millions to support the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, shows how public institutions have become tools to the war on Tigray. Avil Zagab reports.
Head for Bureau of Education, Shisha Amara, says Ethiopia's Ministry of Education is violating international law to please Abiy Ahmed. This comes after Ethiopia's Ministry of Education donated more than 210 million birr to Ethiopian National Defense Forces last week. The head says the act brings no surprise since the Ethiopian government is using all means to exterminate the people of Tigray.
You see, it has been close to 3 years since the total denial of right to education to Tigrayan children. See, as a civic institution, what could Ministry of Education think was, on the ways to devise alternative education systems to Tigrayan children, since they are citizens of Ethiopia, actually. So far, we are citizens of Ethiopia. So by taking this as perspective, what one can expect from Ministry of Education is on modalities to serve the Tigrayan children for their right to education. But in fact, this fascist group, let alone thinking to respect the right to education of Tigrayan children, is ultimately a group that decided to completely vanish the entire Tigrayan people. So it's not going to leave the children, it's not going to leave the women, it's not going to leave the special need society. It's for the entire Tigrayan people that they came to vanish from this land. So ultimately they are serving their objective, which is pleasing their Lord, Abiy Ahmed. It's really extreme manship, that one can say. So what is the ultimate checkpoint for such manians is on how to please their Lord. So if there is any way for them to please Abiy, they don't care about, what the international conventions, declarations are, prohibiting to any civilian authority or civilian infrastructure not to be used in different military activities.
Recalling Ethiopian Airlines busy weeks transporting weaponry to Ethiopian National Defense Forces, the head says Ethiopian officials wouldn't care to violate international laws and standards if they will have Abiy pleased.
That was really seen. We have been observing that the Ethiopian Airlines been serving the military activities of Abiy Ahmed, transporting military personnel, military equipment, and ultimately it was to the intention of vanishing Tigrayan people. And when you see this is happening by a civic institution called Ethiopian Airlines, it was really weird from the perspective of the international rules and regulations and conventions. And the same is happening in Ministry of Education. And we know the leadership there is probably one of the best minds of that lot. And they don't really see on what these guys are doing. They really see on how they are going to please their Lord. And that's why they did this.
Shisha also accused the Ethiopian government of enrolling children who should have been spending their times in education into its military ranks, violating children's right to education. He calls Ethiopian officials too irresponsible to care for children.
Yeah, actually, the Ministry of Education is not delivering only the monetary support. It's also not respecting the right to education of Ethiopian children. And they're keeping silent, or they are supporting, the enrollment of underage children to the military enrollment. This is evident from the military personnel that are surrendering to Tigrayan forces. They don't really care about the children that are missing the service of education. They don't really care about the children that are prohibited or denied from the right to education and the right to protection. The best example to evaluate this is the denial happened in Tigray. So far, it's close to 3 years that since the Tigrayan children are denied the access to education and even protection. So you don't that much expect from such guys that they will serve to the international rules and regulations of how to, on how to really respect different rules while serving in civic institutions.
Jay Amara calls on the international community and donor organizations to audit the budgets they have released to the education sector in Ethiopia. He also says the Ministry of Education should be held accountable for using the donation money to fund the military.
We have rules and regulations on ground is to mean that there is a consecutive accountability framework. For each rule and regulation, there has to be an accountability framework. So what is expected from the international community in terms of respecting the rules and regulations is bringing the evil act owners or evil act enterprise owners to accountability. You see, education in the entire world is usually supported by different donors. Be it like UNICEF, UNESCO, UNDP, USAID. There are multiple players in supporting education. So Ethiopia is one of the most beneficiaries of this support. So by implication, it is to mean that Birhanu Nagga is providing such multiple millions of birr to military support, is by implication deducting from the benefit of the children, Ethiopian children, which is donated by certain players on supporting education. That means they should ask they should audit the budget they release to support the Ethiopian education and bring the evil actors to accountability.
Global Society of Tigray Scholars and Professionals said the international community should ensure unfettered humanitarian access into Tigray by bringing an end to the 15 months-long siege imposed on the region. In a statement this afternoon, the Society said the international community could use alternative routes, including airdrop, to deliver aid and medical supplies into the region. GSTS said the international community should take concrete measure to enact the unconditional withdrawal of Eritrean forces from Tigrayan territories. The Society asked the United Nations, African Union, and other international partners to pressure Abiy Ahmed to stop partnering with Isaias Afwerki and accept the calls for mutually agreed ceasefire. Eritrean soldiers that have fallen into the hands of Tigrayan forces in recent fights say government is forcibly conscripting citizens, including underage children, to its war on Tigray. The prisoners of war call on all Eritreans to refrain from participating in the war. Haile Gabru reports.
The presence of Eritrean forces in the war on Tigray has been undeniable fact as they have committed horrific crimes on civilians alongside with their allied Ethiopian and Amhara forces, acts that the international community has been condemning. Following the full-fledged offensive launched by the Ethiopian forces and their allies at the end of August, the government of Eritrea has been mobilizing its troops and forcibly conscripting underage children as well as the elderly to invade Tigray in multiple fronts. This is Said Al-Hassan Saleh. He is a 16-year-old prisoner of war. He says he was forcibly conscripted by the Eritrean government as he tried to escape the regime's brutal governance.
My name is Said Saleh Hassan. I'm 16 years old, Solidar. I am from Baz, Eritrea. At first, Eritrean soldiers arrested me in a border to Sudan while I was trying to escape from Eritrea. Then they forced me to join Sawa for a military training. I am one of the 35th round graduates. It's been almost 3 months since I graduated. We didn't know where they would take us, but we were told that the Afar militia from Eritrea would show us the way. However, they left us somewhere. And then the war with Tigrayan forces started. Half of our members have died in the war, but we are alive because we are surrendered to Tigrayan forces.
Another prisoner of war, Ahmed Nur Hussein, says Eritrean forces have launched a full-fledged war on Tigray and added that he was captured in the direction of Afar.
They brought us from Gahtalai to Gala'alo, claiming that we would be reserve force. After a while, they deployed us in Badda, a border place between Ethiopia and Eritrea. Then our commanders told us that units from the Afar Special Forces will be leading the journey. The infantry divisions were supported by tanks, artillery and mortars from behind. However, these forces didn't do as told. They returned back. After that, the war started and it was very difficult for us. We were lucky because we surrendered to Tigrayan forces. At first, our commanders didn't tell us where we were going, but we were later informed that we would invade Tigray.
Many young people in Eritrea continue to be forced to partake in the war on Tigray under the threat of severe punishment to themselves and their families. The prisoners of war also say that Eritreans should refrain from participating in the war on Tigray.
My family might think that I have died. They will get stressed over this. I call on all Eritreans to think twice before joining to military. Otherwise, this will be devastating for them as well.
A forcefully conscripted soldier will never have courage to fight because they don't have reasons to fight for. Most members of Eritrean Defense Forces have no interest in fighting in the war. Therefore, I advise my Eritrean brothers and sisters to say no to the war now.
For more than 30 years, Eritreans have been subjected to forceful conscription in Sawa military training center located in Gashbarka zone, where children as young as 12 and people as old as 70 would be forced to join active combats.
Since the beginning of the war on Tigray, several atrocities ranging from the arbitrary and mass killing of civilians to weaponized sexual violence have been committed. Our reporters visited the vicinity of Addosan in the district of Tsalamti, northwestern Tigray, that has recently been recaptured by Tigrayan forces, and spoke with residents who say they witnessed the massacre of numerous civilians. Again, Haligabo reports.
In the month of September this year, members of the Ethiopian security forces, including the Amhara militia and Fano vigilante group, would commit yet another horrific act of massacre in northwestern zone of Tigray, Tsalemti district, where 17 civilians were brutally murdered and 5 others wounded.
17 civilians have been killed so far. On top of this, we have also 5 people who are seriously injured.
The way they had been killed was quite shocking. At least they deserve laid to rest on time. However, we were prevented from burying the corpse for days. This shows us their cruelty has no limit at all. This was intentionally done so as to destroy our conscience and let the people live in grief.
The residents also added that civilians and civilian properties have been the targets of Ethiopian forces and allies before their retreat following the recapturing of the area by the Tigrayan forces.
Over 300 goats and 35 other cattle have been slaughtered by the enemy forces in Dukwakwa and Adukobiye, the local vicinities in Tsalemti district. There are also many cattle which we don't know of their whereabouts. They have looted and vandalized our property. We have left only with the clothes we had worn.
They took out our clothes. We had money, soaps and other properties essential for our survival. However, we have nothing now. They also took 11,000 birr from me.
Civilians who have nothing to do with the politics were being viciously killed. Besides, they have also slaughtered 11 cattle which belonged to me and my father.
The residents say that people in Tsalemti are in dire need of life-saving food assistance due to the fact that their grains have been transported to other places in Amhara and burned by the Amhara forces.
Our grains have been transported to some other places. Our houses are left empty. Some of the properties have been looted and others have also been destroyed. Sadly, they have also destroyed our agricultural fruits. This is quite genocidal.
Internally displaced persons have been among the most affected by the ongoing siege, as they continue to suffer from the lack of food, medical supplies, and adequate shelter. We spoke with Leta Hailu, who says she and many IDPs like her that suffer from chronic illnesses have been forced to sell out little food aid they received so as to buy medications. Meron Yamana has more.
Letai Hailu is an IDP who is currently sheltered in Mala. She was forcibly displaced from her own home, the district of Tigray, by the Fano vigilante group. Letai is a single mother living with HIV virus. She says that her son has been suffering from mental illness. The spiraling siege-induced lack of medication, which has deprived her of getting her retroviral treatment for 3 weeks now, has become a major setback that she can't possibly think of a way to survive.
I'm an HIV patient, and my son, who is 13 years old, is also mentally ill. And the war has made it impossible for him to get medication. In all the times we went to hospitals, we were constantly told that there were no medications. I've stopped my antiretroviral therapy for 3 weeks now. My son has often experienced seizures. We are experiencing an untold misery.
Letai also says that the food aids they receive are far from meeting the staggering needs of the camps, adding that even after receiving these small amounts of aid, they're forced to sell it to purchase medications from private pharmacies at unaffordable prices.
We've only received food aid twice in these 7 months. The food we received is nowhere near enough. On top of that, we're forced to sell the aid we receive and buy these expensive medicines from private pharmacies.
Letai added that the plastic shelters they live in are delicate and easily crumpled by wind or rain. In addition, she says, they suffer from extreme cold at nights and are exposed to dangerous wild animals.
It is very cold at night in these shelters. Hyenas barge in at night, and rats are everywhere. During the rainy season, the wind blows away the plastic shelters we live in. We are then forced to move to another shelter we can possibly find.
Lastly, Letai urged the international community to initiate the peace dialogues that are being advised by the Tigrayan government and take a step towards facilitating the peace process, as well as to provide urgent humanitarian assistance to those who are suffering beyond measure.
Well, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. See you next time.